New World, the game with nearly as much hype as No Man's Sky and nearly as much letdown as No Man's Sky, in the early days at least. Well, here we are again, just a bit over a year later. So, instead of talking for 5 minutes before getting into anything, let's just get right into it. Here we go. On September 28th of 2021, New World released to the world. After promising and mostly positive response during the beta, hundreds of thousands and almost 1 million at one point of players poured into the game. Within the first week, Amazon was scrambling to open up more and more servers to accommodate the unexpected inflow of players. At its peak, dozens of servers were running at full capacity just in the Western group alone. With the EU and other areas added, including East Coast, there were somewhere near 100 servers or more that were running all at once. The first few days and weeks of New World were more or less bliss. Now, players were thrown into some of the most beautiful landscapes that they had ever seen in any MMO, or really any game for that matter. The graphics were top-notch, the sound even better, the PvP everywhere design made for tons of player-generated experiences, and the invasions, well, the invasions were a bit of a mess, as were the wars, but the idea was great. Now, as is the case in every new MMO, a significant portion of the player base rushed to get to the maximum level, which was 60 and still is at the time of this recording, so that they could experience endgame content. Within a few days, players were already hitting the level 60 mark, myself included, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit. Suddenly, grumblings were beginning from the top about lack of content or really anything happening in the end game. As the first few weeks dragged on, more and more players reached this peak, and more began to realize that this beautiful and grand game was not so grand. Aside from the lack of endgame content, bugs and exploits reared their ugly heads. Invasions and wars were often so filled with lag, it was more of a contest between the internet connections and hardware than actual skill. It seemed that every patch to fix one thing would break another. Hatchets were doing 10,000 damage a strike, bots were farming and selling gold, filling chat with their spam, and any number of other issues were arising and causing players to leave. First, the player-based population started to drop, then it went into a freefall. Peaking at just under 1 million players, within 5 months, it had dropped to just over 34,000. Amazon Games rushed in to consolidate the many servers that had now become ghost towns. For the next 4 months, the numbers continued to drop until they bottomed out at just over 26,000 concurrent players. That's a near 98% drop in player base. While all MMOs admittedly suffer a drop after their opening, 98% is a dismal number by any calculation. However, that is not the end of the story. Around August of 2022, thanks to a steady flow of patches, bug fixes, and much better bot squashing on the part of the devs, numbers began to creep up. In the same way New World had plummeted to near obscurity, it began to skyrocket back up to success. At the time of this video, the player base is nearing 140,000 players on peak times, and it is continuing to grow at a very large percentage every month. So, that's all done. What led to this comeback? Well, let's go down the list. Number 1, endgame content. This was my personal biggest complaint and played a significant role in my exit from New World at the end of 2021. So, where are we at now compared to those dark days? Well, endgame has been greatly enriched from the early days. Now the once very vague gear score mechanic is well documented in-game through help pop-ups as well as your equipment UI. Leveling gear score is easily trackable simply by checking your inventory. Also, dungeons have difficulty beyond the initial sets. These are called mutations. Think of difficulty modes in games like Diablo 2 and 3, where you get Nightmare 12 or Nightmare 13 or whatever, things like that. That's kind of what a mutation is. The higher the mutation, the more difficult the fight, and the greater the reward because of it. Also, with the addition of Brimstone Sands, a new area, level 60s can run through a long and very rewarding quest line that hands out legendary weapons and endgame crafting rewards. Amazon heard the complaints about Endgame, and I'm happy to say they answered it with a roar. Number 2, bots. Anyone who plays knows that bots certainly do exist, and in great numbers. However, gold farm spamming bots have been all but crushed thanks to an easy bot reporting system, and gathering bots, while annoying, do not inundate most servers to the point of ruining the player experience. This is not to say there are not bots, there are plenty of them still out there, particularly gathering ones, but the gold farming bots have gotten much quieter and global chat is less full of their nonsense. There is still a long way to go on fixing bots, however, so this is definitely something I'm hoping Amazon focuses on in the near future. Next up, number 3, bugs. This is an area that will always be ongoing, of course. Any MMO that exists and continues to exist will always be squashing new bugs and undoing bugs created by their own patches. But the bugs now present in New World are far less game-breaking than they were in late 2021. At the time of this video, there are still many out there who believe that certain weapons are broken. For example, the Greatsword, which some people believe does far too much damage, but others just enjoy that. But hey, compared to the Hatchet exploit of late 2021 and other bugs that I knew back in those days, this one is quite mild and just needs a little tweaking, and I wouldn't even call it a bug, just a design. The few invasions that I have been in since returning have run very smoothly, with the exception of the game's timeout mechanic, kicking players who are waiting for the invasion to start. Again, not a bug, just something that Amazon could possibly fix up a little bit to make the invasion experience a little bit more manageable. Number 4, new content. Now, I mentioned before Brimstone Sands. Well, this area adds plenty of great Roman and Egyptian type lore to the game, as well as quest lines that cater to endgame players. In fact, if you aren't level 60 and haven't done a specific mission, you can't even enter Brimstone. You will die of exposure to the sun. Also, the look of many cities has changed, and the taxation system has been globalized. This, among many, many other changes since the early days, makes for a much richer and more rounded game. I was quite surprised when I walked into Monarch's Bluff and saw a giant castle instead of a beachside town. I can't list all the changes that have happened in the game in this video because there were quite a few of them, but overall the content has enlarged immensely from the last time I played this game, which was about a year from the making of this video. Oh, and I have to give an honorable mention to my absolute favorite addition to this game. No, it's not a new combat area, armor, or even items. It's a mini game of all things. Music. Freaking music. Holy crap, I have wanted a game with a good music system since Star Wars Galaxies. That was 20 years ago almost. So aside from Lord of the Rings Online, I really can't think of any games that have fantastic in-game player music ability. Some genius over at Amazon Games actually got a music minigame implemented, and boy is it fun. As someone who fell in love with the concept of band performances back in the days of Galaxies, so let's say 2006 or so, I have longed to see something like that in a game ever since. New World absolutely delivered. Sure, music isn't vital to the game, but it sure helps. Offering various buffs for players and groups, you can find musicians in virtually every town at any time of day. If you're really lucky, you can find a whole band. Each playing a music minigame makes it a great experience and helps buff your party. To be honest, if the rest of the game was still a hot mess, I would just be sitting here in one of these towns playing my guitar with a smile on my face and not playing anything else. New World hasn't just received a fresh coat of paint. It's had the oil changed, the shocks replaced, and a second engine dropped under the hood for maximum Mad Max style horsepower. So now we come to the elephant in the room, the big burning question: is New World worth playing a year later? The simple answer is yes, absolutely. Hundreds of hours of additional content have been added to the game, the music minigame is now a thing, which I love, and players are returning, in droves in fact. For me, the community of any MMO is key to its success, and that community is coming back. It is bringing back that feeling of belonging, of community that makes the best MMOs the best MMOs. If you're considering checking out New World again, now is probably a great time to do so. The game is experiencing a rebirth of sorts and is growing again by leaps and bounds. So come play with us. On the off chance you want to come play with me, in particular, I am on a West Coast server called Ionis, and I run a Marauder guild called the Gorgonites. That's the Marauder Guild is the green guys, the green colored guys. So come check us out on Discord. The link is in the video description. Until then, I will see you all in New World, I hope. And if you've never played New World, give it a look. It is worth checking out now. It is a quote-unquote complete MMO. Of course, there is more work to be done. The game is never going to be complete because there's no such thing in any MMO, but I would say the game is in a very healthy and playable state compared to 1 year ago. So I'll see you all in the game, and thank you for watching.